You are listening to A Scary State, and this week we're covering Maine. So, Kenzie?
Yes, Lauren.
Let's get scary.
Woohoo.
We are recording officially November 1st, Kenzie month.
The best month of the year.
It's the most wonderful time. We should have gone to the storage unit a while ago, but we just haven't made the trip yet.
I should start asking for a quarter every time you say to me that we need to go to the storage unit.
But at this point, half of it's our Christmas decorations, so we might as well just keep it because we'll be putting it up soon.
That'd be good.
We went to a Christmas parade, Halloween parade yesterday. I dressed up as a taco for Taco Tuesday.
That is not why we dressed
It's
up.
not, but it worked really well. And then Mackenzie was an avocado.
You stole that person's idea.
It was genius.
We didn't think of it.
We're walking in the parade. Mackenzie's an avocado.
Wow, I can't believe she just tried to take credit for that.
I'm a taco. We're walking, and someone looks at me and goes, Taco Tuesday. I was like, oh my God.
We were very shocked that we didn't think of it until
rolled with it the whole day. If you follow us on social media, you saw many different pictures of our costumes.
We were the best avocado and taco.
It was very comfy.
I think a lot of people liked us because I kept hearing, is that an avocado?
Yeah.
Sure is. Or I have a green body and a brown fuzzy belly.
I'm glad you're avocado though, because the one costume where the pit is actually your stomach.
I would not have worn that costume.
No, I know. So that's why when Mom was like, oh, it's an avocado, I was like, what kind of avocado costume is this?
It was a very cute one. It was fuzzy.
It was a very cute one. It looked very comfy.
Mm-hmm.
So this round of states is our third round through.
Yeah.
Which is
season 3, baby.
Season 3, though we don't have seasons. So this one will focus on natural. What?
Unofficially.
Yeah, unofficially. We don't take breaks in between.
Yeah, we just roll right into the next one.
Right on in. So this round of state facts will focus on natural wonders in each of the 50 states. So CNN has a great interactive article that showcases a natural wonder in each state. Some are world-renowned and undeniably spectacular, while others are less discovered gems. Each spot in its way helps define its home state. Because we are a scary state, spooky facts will be included with each natural wonder.
We're going to try.
Yeah, that is the goal for the next 50 states.
Because I already got to the second one and I'm like, damn, there's nothing. So if I can't find spooky facts, I was thinking about it today when I was driving over here of weird nature facts, obscure, just, 72 most dangerous animals and
oh, I love the animal stuff.
I know.
Because I've included it in some because I just love it.
Well, I listed a lot of the animals found in Maine, and I looked at the list, and I'm like, well, I'll put it in there for now, and she can decide if it's something that we keep. There was a lot more for West Virginia, so I didn't include as many of the animals. And I think some of these might end up being repeaters, but...
Like animals?
Just some of the nature facts, as I read them, I'm like, I don't know if Lauren's used this in the past.
Well, if you're listening to all of the main ones back to back to back, you could be like, oh, that's a repeat fact. But if you listen to them in order, you're not going to remember because we don't remember.
Exactly. So I figured it was a safe...
Yeah, probably a safe bet.
And you will let me know if you remember, so it's all good.
Chances are I won't.
There you go.
We have drastically different beverages with us today. Last week it was wine. This week it's coffee.
When I went to my friend's house the other day, we were drinking wine, and it went down the wrong tube, it did. But it was really bad down the wrong pipe. I'm like, must be what it's like to drown.
That's scary.
Oh my God, it was terrible. Absolutely terrifying.
Glad you made it.
Yeah, anyway, like I was saying, 90% of Maine is covered in forest, and they are filled with black oaks, sugar maples, black walnuts, and American elms, in addition to the white pine trees.
Oh.
It is nicknamed the Pine Tree State for its white pine trees that grow there.
Very clever.
Because of its rocky coastline, Maine is famous for lighthouses. It has more than 60 of them. So some of the animals.
Yes.
The mammals. Won't go into what a mammal is. If you don't know, look it up. Although I could explain it, but I won't. You have the moose, which is the state animal. You have black bears. I love mooses too. Bobcats, white-tailed deer, which we also have.
Mm-hmm.
And the Canada lynx.
Which we do not have.
We do not have, no. For birds, you have the bald and golden eagles, ospreys, the great gray owls, and roseate terns. Don't know what those are. For the reptiles, you got snakes and more snakes.
Yes.
You got the northern red belly, the smooth green, and the eastern garter.
Aw,
I included those for you.
thank you.
And that was the only ones the website listed. And then for amphibians, eastern painted turtles, which I was like, I thought turtles were reptiles.
I don't know.
Because amphibians are born in water. The natural wonder for Maine is well known, I guess. And it's Baxter Peak on Mount
Katahdin.
Ah, there you go.
That's the pronunciation I did earlier today.
Shows how much I was paying attention.
I literally, before we record, Mackenzie and I will listen to pronunciations of different words. I literally listened to the pronunciation of that word out loud because it played through my speakers.
I did these last week, so I don't remember what they are. Okay, well, it's the highest peak in Maine, and it's the northern end of the Appalachian Trail, which I thought was really cool.
Mm-hmm.
The 5,268-foot peak. Do you know the thing to remember how many feet are in a mile?
Isn't it like
Five.
tomato, like 282?
5 tomatoes.
5 tomatoes.
5, 2,
8.
8, 0.
I knew it was something with
5,
tomatoes.
Yeah. So this peak is just under a mile.
Wow. And I also read that there are rocks on top of the peak that do make it to a mile, like because they're so high up. Because it's
Smart.
very close to a mile, so
Yeah.
people just like touch the rocks to be like, that they hit the top.
The name comes from Greatest Mountain in Penobscot.
Penobscot?
That sounds better. Penobscot. And it's thought to be the most difficult hike on the whole trail.
More on that later.
Mm-hmm. Snowfall can come any time of year, and temperatures vary widely. There are many easier scenic options that you can do, like skirting lakes, ponds, and waterfalls throughout Baxter State Park. They have a big and little Niagara Falls, and there's opportunities for rock climbing.
That scares me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I can barely do it when it's inside.
Oh, yeah, that would scare me too. Because it would be the heights, and then I would be scared that they wouldn't catch me if I fell.
Yep.
And then I would get scared halfway up, and I'm like, I need to come down. I need to. Because they used to have it at like Sporting Goods or Dick's, or one of those had the rock wall.
Yes. Did I tell you my triumphant rock climbing story?
Maybe.
I feel like I have, so stop me if maybe I've told you. I probably have definitely told you. I was 10. There was one of those sporting goods stores with the rock climbing walls. And I really wanted Dairy Queen. I was with my dad, and he never let me get Dairy Queen before dinner. But he said if I made it to the top that I could have whatever I wanted. And so I start going. He, meanwhile, probably thought that I wasn't going to go that high because he knows I'm afraid of heights. He's just waiting for me to finally register because he's always the one that has to come get me and get me down. So he's like, easy win. Wahaha. Fooled him. He goes up to the second floor so that he can like tell me, where to grab and to like keep going. I get to the top and I have to let go to ring the bell. Which that took another 5 minutes.
Why'd you have to let go? Why couldn't you just with one hand?
Well, like that, I had to take one of my hands off to do that. And that was one too many. So I finally did. And then they were like, okay, so just let go. And I'm like, what?
You saw how hard it was to do this.
I was like, you want me to trust you? Please.
How'd you get down?
I had to trust them and let go.
The biggest trust fall.
But seriously though, I got down just fine. I was shaking like a fucking leaf because of adrenaline that I didn't know what that was. I was like, why am I shaking, Dad? And he's like, it's called adrenaline. I'm like, whoa, this is great.
But you got your Dairy Queen.
I got a brownie volcano.
Ooh.
I went.
Nice choice. Nice choice.
Yeah. Never climbed a wall again. One
was enough.
One hit wonder for sure.
You did it, crossed off the bucket list, you're good to go.
There's very few things that would have motivated me to do it twice.
Yeah.
I felt like this was a true victory. I was like, this never happens. I have to do this.
My 10-year-old victory.
Right. Dad gave me a pity Dairy Queen the second time when I brought my sister and tried to impress her and didn't make it up. Oh, wait.
Did she make it?
I don't remember. But we still got Dairy Queen, so.
Oh, that's all that matters. The most important part was remembered.
Exactly. So
Penobscot?
Thank you. Indian entity called Pomola dwells on
Katahdin.
Stories of the spirit have been retold and altered many times over the years, but it is generally agreed that it has the head of a moose, large wings, and the feet of a bird. Pomola is said to stir up cold weather and storms. Some describe the spirit as evil, while others claim it is a protector of the mountain.
What you do with your words is you'll go, sometimes, no, that's wrong. Sometimes, no. Sometimes, no. Some.
I'm telling you, my eyes see some describe the spirit as evil, but whatever happens in the in-between of going into my brain and out of my mouth, I don't know what happens. There is some sort of disconnect, because I do the same thing with numbers. If it's like 582, I'll do 528. I'll say 582.
Yeah.
But I'll say it.
No, I get that one.
That's why I couldn't spell, because I would insert letters that were not there.
Hey, it comes with the territory. You have a silent letter at the beginning of your name.
Exactly. I'm just used to them magically being there.
Yeah. It's there when you need it.
And as you may know, author Stephen King was born in Maine, and his hometown of Bangor was the model for many of the towns in his scary movies.
And stories.
And stories. That's what I meant. Is a story. Oh, and before we go into anything else, we are aware of everything going on in the news with Maine.
Yes.
And, we like to cover stories that not many have heard of, or maybe just the locals have. And it's so prevalent in the news, and it's so fresh that, it's not a story that we necessarily felt we needed to cover, but we did want to acknowledge it and know that all of our friends in Maine, this episode is for you.
Yeah.
And we're thinking of you and your families and friends and neighbors and, thoughts and prayers, because I guess that's all we have at this point.
I know.
So, yeah, just wanted to address that before.
Yes. Yeah. We didn't want to go into this episode, and not address that.
Oh, my gosh. And speaking of other major things in the news, I decided to watch Friends as I typed up this episode. And at least on HBO, when you click on it, when you watch the episode, it has a little, they put a little tribute in for him.
TBS, too, I think, is doing a nonstop Friends marathon of all of, Chandler's best moments.
Yeah.
It's so sad.
It is. It is.
It's so sad. In our last episode, which went out the day that we're recording it, so we recorded it a week ago.
Right.
Or, today.
Yeah.
We recorded a week ago before any of that happened. We even had, a Friends quote in there because it's just so prevalent, with our lives.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's very sad.
But, hopefully this will be a nice break from the sad world we're currently living in.
As we go into sad things.
Yeah.
And spooky things.
Sad and spooky. But, sometimes if you tell a story right, it can make you smile.
Beautiful, Mackenzie.
Thank you. I tried.
Beautiful.
What you know, Daddy-o?
So Mackenzie covered some of the things that I'm going to be talking about today and got really mad when I told her that she didn't need to cover it because I was covering it. But now you might hear some things repeat times. So 89% of Maine is forested. That is a large amount of wilderness.
That is.
And so if you know anything about me, you know I am fascinated with all things forest related, disappearances, missing 411,
everything,
all of that jazz. So of course I had to cover disappearances in Maine, and I decided to focus on Baxter State Park.
Wow, look at that. We're just so connected.
So connected. So the Baxter State Park is a huge area of wilderness preserved as a state park in northeast Piscataqua County.
I might have just pissed off a lot of people.
It has over 209,644 acres of wilderness.
Wow.
The park has many visitors and hikers constantly in the area, with over 60,000 people visiting the park in the summer months alone.
Wow.
The mountain in the state park, Katahdin, is the end part of the Appalachian Trail and is the highest mountain in all of Maine at 5,269 feet.
What?
Which is 1,606 meters. It is also a natural national landmark. No, a national natural landmark. So it's a big mountain. Hiking to the top and back can
Big
boy. Hiking to the top and back can take anywhere from 8 to 12 hours, and it is an easy one. Most of the hike is in maximum exposure, so if the weather changes, the hiker can be screwed and really in some trouble. NewEngland.com says to be very well prepared if you want to hike it. They recommend bringing at least 2 quarts of water, a working flashlight, durable hiking boots, rain gear, extra clothing, a detailed map, high-energy food, and a first aid kit. It is apparently a beautiful view and an amazing hike, but being in the wilderness, you need to be prepared. So tonight I'm going to tell you the story of Don Fendler, a 9-year-old boy known as the boy who survived a mountain in Maine, as well as 2 other stories. So Don Charles Fendler was born on August 29th, 1926 in Rye, New York. Yes, New York. We'll be in Maine soon.
It's okay. I start off in Norway, so.
Oh. When he was 12, on July 17th, 1939, he went hiking with his family in Maine on Mount Katahdin. The group he was with included his father, Donald, brothers Tom and Ryan, family friend Fred Eaton, and other friend Henry Condon. One source said that Henry was 17. No other sources mentioned his age. But if he was 17, that is kind of a big difference in age between 12. But either way, they're friends. During the hike, they decided to forge a bit ahead of the group. Don and Henry had actually reached the summit before the others had. And their group was pretty high up on the mountains. Don and Henry were at the summit when the clouds started to roll in and icy winds started to blow.
Ruh-roh.
Temperatures dropped, fog came in. Don, shivering in the cold, decided to head back down the trail to meet up with the rest of the group, while Henry thought it would be best for them to just wait. He wanted to wait for a man they had seen approaching so they could have an adult accompany them down the mountain. Very smart. Henry got a little cold, so Don gave him a sweatshirt and told Henry that he was going to head back down, so he turned and disappeared into the fog. But Fendler never found his family. So obviously, a massive manhunt was launched to find Don. The news of his disappearance on the mountain became front-page news across the nation and garnered a lot of attention. So at first, I was like, it was all over the national, media. And then I was like, did they have media like that in 1926?
Newspapers.
Yeah, so it would have been only front page, but it wouldn't have been on TVs or anything.
No, maybe radio.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I was like, interesting. But yeah, all over the front page. Hundreds of volunteers came out to help search for Don, including other Boy Scouts, as he was one, mill workers, New York State Police, and literally everyone in between. Bloodhounds were brought in to try to follow his scent. They were able to pick up a scent, which led them to cliffs at Saddle Spring where the trail was lost. Eventually, though, the dogs had to be called off from the search because their paws were getting torn and cut up from the rocks in the terrain.
Poor buddies. I got dogs in mine.
Oh, I went online today and I wanted to buy Halloween or Christmas things. And I found this really cute sweater and it has these dogs on it and some are wearing Santa hats and some are wearing reindeer antlers. I didn't buy it yet, but it's in my maybe later list. So after the scent ended here, it was concluded that Don had fallen down the side of the plateau in the area, hence why his scent stopped right at the edge. The search party began to dwindle as the police and searchers started to give up hope that they would ever find him alive, let alone find him at all.
Oh, no.
But Don's family never gave up hope, and his father encouraged searchers to focus on the woods below the plateau where he could have potentially fallen to. As all of this is going on, for 9 days, Don wandered the forest alone without any of the supplies one would need. And I remember, I listed all the supplies he kind of needed.
There's a lot.
He said that in those first few moments of heading down the mountain, everything looked different in the clouds. He said, quote, "You think you see a man and he turns out to be only a rock. It kind of spares a fellow, especially when you are alone and awfully cold." He knew he had to get off the mountain, especially with the conditions getting worse. Sleet was now pounding down and the wind was whipping at 40 miles per hour, which is 64 kilometers per hour. The temperature also dropped to 40 degrees Fahrenheit or 4 degrees Celsius. But Don was a Boy Scout. He later said that all of his training and knowledge as a Boy Scout helped him to know what to do in a situation like
How
this.
embarrassing would it be if he didn't make it?
He's 12.
Boy Scouts didn't teach him all that much. Now did it?
Well, they did.
Speaking of, you should
How?
watch the Boy Scouts of America documentary on Hulu.
Why?
That was good.
Is it true crimey?
Mm-hmm.
Oh. Jared was Boy Scout. He didn't get up to Eagle Scout or anything, but
Oh, so he was young.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he was young. All right, so Don, he knew he had to keep his head up and alert and look around to find a trail. After searching and wandering the whole first day, he was still lost and ended up taking shelter in the roots of a large tree that night to sleep. When he woke up the next day, he saw his friend Henry sitting by a nearby stream.
He's hallucinating.
Quote, "You may think this was a dream, but it wasn't. I know it wasn't a dream, even though it sounds crazy now."
Did Henry confirm?
4 more ghostly figures appeared to Don while he was lost in the woods.
Oh.
So you were right the first time. This was all followed by him seeing his father drive up the mountain in a car.
I'm not going to lie. I have decided that if for some reason I am in some insane predicament, and you see or you hear about on the TVs and the things about people
On the TVs and things.
about people disassociating
Mm-hmm.
or seeing a person and it helps them get through it. I hope to God that happens to me.
Oh my God, me too. So he sees his dad driving up the mountain in a car. With a flood of relief, he screamed out, "Here I am, Dad," as he sprinted forward. But not really watching where he was running, he ran and fell right into a stream. And when he pulled himself out, all of the figures he had seen were gone. All of the figures had been hallucinations caused by lack of sleep and lack of food. He knew that no one was coming for him, and he knew it was on him to get out. From Boy Scouts, he remembered learning to follow streams downhill, and then that could lead to civilization. But by doing so, things started to go downhill. Ba-dum-tsh. On just the second day, he lost his shoes while hiking barefoot down the creek. His jeans soon followed after that, also being carried downstream when he tried to toss them on top of a rock. And it was summer, so the bugs were out in full force. Black flies and mosquitoes swarmed him, biting him and crawling into his ears and nose.
At least it was warm, question mark?
Well, the temperature was kind of cold at the time. Like, nights was 40, and like you said, the temperature varies drastically. Like, it can snow any time of year.
Yeah.
The whole time he was out in the woods, he survived on stream water berries. I don't know what those are, but some berries. Something he had learned about in the Scouts. Twice he encountered black bears while he was out gathering fruit.
As we know, they are native to Maine.
Exactly. So helpful.
I know.
He found
really picture it.
He found abandoned buildings along his way and took a blanket from one to help stay warm.
Oh my God, Maine has abandoned buildings.
Oh my God. At one point, a plane passed overhead, never knowing that there was a young boy down below trying to get its attention. By now, his feet were covered in cuts. He had lost part of a toe, and his knees were badly swollen, but he kept pushing forward, searching for a way out. On the 8th day, exhausted and hopeless, Don fell to the ground, where he laid for a while, almost ready to give up, when suddenly he felt something grab him by the shoulders and slowly and gently pull him to his feet. When he was standing, he quickly looked around, but no one was there. Your guardian angel must have been helping you, his father later said after the encounter. It took him 9 days, but he eventually made his way out of the state park by following a stream and telephone lines out of the woods. On July 25th, he came out near Stacyville at the Lunxos camp along the Penobscot River, 35 miles or 56 kilometers from where he had originally disappeared.
Wow.
35 miles.
Wow. That's
56 kilometers. That's a lot.
No, I was trying to think if that's between you and me, but that's not. It's shorter.
Yeah. No. We're shorter than 35 miles.
Yes.
Yeah. Then Don saw a man across the water, so he started yelling and was able to get the attention of Nelson McHorn and another man. The two men canoed across the river over to Don and brought him back to their campsite.
Our stories are weirdly similar events happen.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So they brought him back to the campsite while he explained his whole ordeal. Back at the campsite, Lena McHorn fed him soup as they got Don's parents on the phone. When he was found, he was very dehydrated, covered in bug bites, and weighed 16 pounds or 7 kilometers less than he had. You would die. Your bones alone weigh like 16 pounds.
Hence my intense reaction of shock.
So 16 pounds, 7 kilometers less than he had.
Kilometers?
Kilograms, not kilometers. Less than he had 9 days prior when he went missing, meaning that he was less than 60 pounds or 27 kilograms. Online told me that a typical 12-year-old boy should weigh between 67 and 130 pounds.
That makes sense.
So 30 to 59 kilograms. So he was way below that.
Yeah.
He was taken to a Bangor hospital and thankfully made a full recovery. It was later determined that the searchers were never within 10 miles of him after that first day. So first day, they were somewhat close. And after that, he was gone and they were still in this area.
He kept moving.
He kept moving.
Yeah.
Just a year later, Don met with President Franklin D. Roosevelt, who presented him with the Army and Navy Legion of Valor's annual medal for Outstanding Youth Hero.
That's really fucking cool.
There was a parade in his honor, and he was even featured in an article in Life magazine. Yeah.
I'm on a parade in my honor.
You kind of had one yesterday. We were walking, and Mackenzie's like, this is what I live for, because we're walking down a street. It's just us, and everyone's like on the side, like watching us walk and cheering.
I'm just imagining how we were on The Bachelorette and on your Bachelorette, and we were doing karaoke, and I'm like, you can so tell which one of us is the extrovert and which one of us is the introvert.
Yeah. As he got older, he went on to have a distinguished military career, serving in World War II and Vietnam, retiring from the Army as a lieutenant colonel. I wonder if he knew Papa, because Papa was also a lieutenant colonel, I believe, in Vietnam. How long was Vietnam?
4 or 5 years. Started in the late 60s, ended in the early 70s.
So could be.
Ended.
Yeah. He eventually wrote a book titled Lost on a Mountain in Maine about his experience. He wrote it from his perspective as a young boy. And
not the only ones that like alliteration.
Yeah, right. And in the book, he detailed his harrowing story from start to finish, to include how he experienced hallucinations from the fatigue and hunger and how he ended up losing most of his clothes.
You know what? I'm going to write a memoir about our experience at Blue Ridge.
What would it be called?
Bad Times at Blue Ridge.
Battered Down at Blue Ridge. We'll workshop it. This book that he wrote became a required reading in schools across Maine.
Damn, God, this guy's life sounds so cool. I mean, minus like the first part.
Minus the 9 days being lost in the Maine wilderness.
Right, but like you get to meet FDR.
I know. Have a parade about you, write books.
Like there's a couple of presidents I would like to meet, and he's one of them.
Why?
He just did a lot, like historically speaking, and
you are such a history nerd.
Well, it's like a story.
I know, but you're such a history nerd.
Yeah.
Every time there's like something about history, you're like, oh my God, let me tell you about this. And you say all these things. And I'm like, how the hell do you know this?
I don't know a ton of history. I know like the big things from the past because I'm like, well, this is so boring. I like modern history. I find it fascinating.
Modern history is much more fascinating.
And FDR's and Annie, which I really liked as a kid. So I think that also has something to do with it.
There's the theater kid.
Yep. Also girls back around.
Always.
Yeah.
On the 70th anniversary of his finding, Bangor Daily News interviewed Don. They shared his whole story and how he survived by eating berries, but also by his never give up attitude, his faith in God, and his prayers. In 1953, a map of the path he took was published for others to see, so they could see the long 35-mile route that he had taken. As he grew up, he would spend most of his summers in Maine, where he would visit schools and tell kids about his journey and answer questions for them about his experience on the mountain. Quote, I tell every one of them that they have something inside them that they don't know they have, he told the Associated Press in 2011. When it comes to a bad situation, they're going to find out how tough a person they are in the heart and the mind. It's called the will to live. Then, 75 years after he was found, Maine Governor Paul LePage declared the day, July 25th, as Don Fenler Day.
Aw.
He passed away on October 10th, 2016 at the age of 90.
Good for him.
On the day of his passing, his family said, quote, we know, Don, that on the trail you are on now, you are anything but lost. Oh, my heart. So that's Don Fenler.
See, that was like a positive one. It ended happy.
Well, now we'll go on to, we just had this amazing tale of survival.
Maybe we should have finished with that.
Yeah, I know. I thought about that too, because not all who hike the Appalachian Trail in Baxter State Park make it out. So about the Appalachian Trail, Appalachian, however you want to pronounce it.
Appalachian.
It spans 2,200 miles between Springer Mountain, Georgia, and Mount Katahdin, Maine. If I'm saying that wrong, I apologize. That's what online told me.
Some guy in a video was very upset.
That was a different word that the Piscataqua one.
Maybe that's why people get mad, is because we just completely butcher it.
I promise, we listen, and then I don't know what happens when we try to say it.
I'm pretty sure that I have an auditory processing disorder, and that's why when someone says something to me and they want me to repeat it.
You're not very good at that.
Oh my God, my poor sweet children would try to teach me things in Arabic. And English and Arabic are literally two different kinds of languages.
Oh, absolutely.
And so then they would say it, but they're little kids. And so it already is kind of hard to understand them. And they would say it and I'd be like, again. And they'd say it and I'm like, slower. And they'd say it really slow. And I'm like, okay, wait, one at a time.
It's like the episode All from Friends where Phoebe's trying to teach Joey French.
That is exactly what it is like. Except I am Joey. I am not Phoebe.
No, you are not.
Oh, no, I'm like Fran Fine when they have a French tutor and he says, je t'adore, and she shuts the door.
That's my language. Between 2 million and 3 million people hike this trail annually, with 10% starting that trail in Maine, usually in June, and hiking the whole thing down to Georgia. Though only a quarter of that number ever finish the route in its entirety. Not meaning that they die, just meaning that they don't do the whole thing.
I mean, I would do it if I could drive. Like if there was like a hiking trail and then like
a driving trail.
A driving trail.
Okay. I don't think that's how that works, but
someone could make a lot of money from it.
But then they'd be disturbing the wilderness.
That's true.
And I think they want to preserve it, don't add more roads and such.
That's a good point.
And I'll get to one of those parts soon. That would not be good to drive through.
Okay.
So 54-year-old Jessie Albertine Hoover headed out to Maine just south of the Baxter State Park in May of 1983 to hike Mount Katahdin. She lived in White Settlement, Texas, with her husband of 35 years, Eugene. And now reading that name, that's not a great name for a town.
What?
White Settlement.
Oh, yeah.
That's not good.
They should probably change that.
Texas.
Mm.
Texas. Years prior, she had seen an article in the National Geographic magazine which talked about the Appalachian Trail, how it goes from Maine to Georgia, and she really took an interest in it. She was interested, but that was it. Just an interest, just like kind of a thing in the back of her mind. Tragically, on November 5th, 1982, her husband Eugene was killed when he was hit by a car.
Oh, no.
His death was incredibly tough on Jessie, and as some do, she started thinking about a life-changing journey. And what better journey than hiking the Appalachian? I'm going to change multiple times. You'll hear different ways to say it. Hiking it in its entirety from Maine to Georgia. The death of her husband seemed to spur her into action of hiking that trail. She spoke to her family about her plans, and while they were worried for her, she was adamant that it was a fine hike and a fine trail for a woman of her age, which was 54. And she took off on the planning. She made a detailed itinerary of all the estimated times that she would arrive at the major stops along the trail in order to pick up supplies, wire for money, all that stuff. She had epilepsy and made plans with her doctor in order to get her refills along the way as well.
Nice.
But what she didn't plan for was making sure she could hike the trail. Just because you can doesn't mean you can. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
She wasn't very...
mean you should.
Right. She wasn't very fit and was not very prepared for what the trail would require physically.
Oh.
To help ease her family's worries, though, she told them that should she feel she couldn't go on, she would call them to come get her.
Mm-hmm.
So on May 16th, 1983, Papa's birthday, not same year, but day, one of her daughters, Mary, drove her to the Greyhound station in Fort Worth for Jessie to set off on her trip. With her, she had a stack of pre-addressed postcards that she would mail along the way at least once a week and an AT&T calling card. The two said goodbye to each other and Jessie boarded the bus. This would be the last time Mary would ever see her mother. Just a few days later, Jessie would make her last phone call home. So on May 16th, 1983, Jessie headed out towards Maine into the 100-mile wilderness to start her trip.
Whew.
The 100-mile wilderness is just that, 100 miles of wilderness. There is a sign at the start of the trail that says, quote, "Caution. There are no places to obtain supplies or get help until Apple Bridge 100 miles north. Do not attempt this section unless you have a minimum of 10 days supplies and are fully equipped. This is the longest wilderness section of the entire Appalachian Trail, and its difficulty should not be underestimated. Good hiking."
I'm glad they have a sign.
Yes. So about this section of the trail, Game Warden Dave Sewall said, you could just wander and wander until your body deteriorates on that section of trail.
Jesus.
So it's like, and I watched a video about it, and it doesn't even look like there's a trail. It's just woods.
Yeah.
And how they do it is one of the creepiest ways to hike is they just have like spray painted trees, like a little patch on a tree. And you're like, oh, I followed like the white patches.
Yeah.
That's how you get out. Joe and I once were hiking in Sugarloaf Mountain. We were following whatever trail. Well, at one point, the colors stop. And it's getting dark. And him and I are looking around and I'm like, where do we go? And he goes, I don't know. So we just kind of walked until we found the road and we took the road down. Like we walked on the road to get down to our car.
Fair.
Because I was like, Joe, it's getting dark. We don't know where we are. Like this is not a good situation.
This is how people die.
But yeah, so that's what this wilderness area looks like.
Yeah.
It's just spray painted trees.
Ooh.
Terrifying.
Yes.
I mean, I guess you could walk 100 miles to get out of it. But then I feel like that could just put you in more.
Walk 100 miles in a day?
Well, not in a day, Mackenzie.
Oh.
You bring like camping gear.
Yeah.
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 But I feel like then like after you get out of the 100-mile wilderness, maybe you're in like different wilderness.
So there's like a little bit of wilderness left before you are in not wilderness?
Who knows?
Mm.
I had a coworker who was like, you know what I would love to do? And we're like, what? He's like, I want to go to one of those like cabins in the woods where you have to take a plane to the cabin because that's how secluded it is. And I was like, so if the plane crashes, you are in the wilderness. And he was like, oh yeah. I said, no. So she sets out. Her family waited. But after she failed to call them to update them on her progress of the trail, her sister reported her missing on July 11th, 2 months after she was last seen. The call was answered by Maine State Police Detective Sergeant Ralph E. Pinkham. She told the police that the last time she had spoken to her sister was on May 16th when Jessie had called from a Bangor motel. At the time, she only had about $15 to $20, but intended to wire some money as she passed through different towns along the trail. At this point, a formal search was launched, led by Game Warden Dave Sewall. The search area was around 15 million acres.
Damn.
With hundreds of miles of trails. And this area was very dense with trees and vegetation. Some areas of the trail aren't well marked, like I said, making it actually relatively easy to lose your bearings and get lost for days. So the searchers definitely had their work cut out for them. But side note, at the same time as she was missing, another hiker had also gone missing. So there was also a search going on for that other hiker. So it's kind of like a doubly search.
Okay.
So good, bad. So in addition to searching, the authorities were also questioning other hikers who had been on the trail that Jessie was thought to be on. All said no, none had seen her. And throughout their investigation, they did find out that Jessie had made it to the entrance of Mount Katahdin on May 20th, 1983, 4 days after she initially started her journey. So she was making progress.
Yeah.
In order to get to the 100-mile wilderness, the place I mentioned, you have to pass through Old Abal Gatehouse on Golden Road, I believe. It was kind of confusing how it all works. But before she could get there, she had to check in with the rangers, I assume, so they are aware of who's going in to make sure you're like prepared for all of this. They warned her that she wasn't well enough equipped for the 100-mile wilderness.
Oh.
She was wearing only jeans, a shirt, and a windbreaker at the time. Like, she had shoes, but those were like the only clothes she had. The weather in May in this area can get as low as the 30s and 40s, -1 to 4 degrees Celsius. It can lead to hypothermia. There was also light rain at the time that she was out. She didn't have nearly enough supplies or the right clothing to make it through. When they asked her, she didn't even have bug spray. So they had to turn her away because she just wasn't prepared enough. An attendant who was working at the gatehouse remembered seeing her in late May of 1983. He said that he saw her heading in the direction of the trailhead for the 100-mile wilderness just on the other side of the bridge. This was the first and last time that the attendant saw her. So this huge search is launched, but even though there were so many people looking, her body, clothes, and backpack were never found.
Oh my God.
Rangers said, quote, "We went over the woods with a fine-tooth comb. If she was there, we would have found her. We don't ignore people in the woods." They also found it very odd, though, that she just disappeared. Like, she left nothing behind. She just vanished.
Yeah.
A final investigative report said that it is believed that Jessie was just unprepared for such a treacherous hike. She had only packed light clothing and beef jerky. Not nearly enough food to last 10 days.
Bro, yeah.
And what is really sad, her case never really received much media attention, so her family is constantly sharing her story about her missing and trying to keep her memory alive. They're hoping that someone someday will come forward and help them get the closure that they are desperately looking for. It's been 40 years since she disappeared.
Wow.
And still to this day, not a single trace has ever been found. But it is sort of inferred that she was just well prepared, and not being prepared can lead to all sorts of things like hypothermia, disorientation, running out of food, accidents, complications with her health, considering she couldn't refill her pills, maybe even foul play. All of those things have been considered.
Yeah.
A 2012 Warden Service Search and Rescue Report, so a SARS thing, stated that only 1% of all people who go missing in the Maine woods are never found. And sadly, Jessie Hoover is part of that 1%.
Damn.
Yes. So I have one more I'm going to talk to you about today.
Okay.
And that would be Geraldine Largay. So this is the case of missing hiker Geraldine Largay. It garnered a lot of media attention, quite a bit more than Jessie Hoover's disappearance did, which is very sad. So 66-year-old Geraldine, Jerry by friends and family, was a retired Air Force nurse who loved to hike. She was determined to hike the Appalachian Trail, the entire thing from Georgia to Maine. She had hiked many trails around her home in Tennessee in preparation. She had taken a course on how to hike the trail, best practices.
So she was a little bit more prepared.
Yes. She made friends easily, which helps when you're on the trail because you do meet a lot of people who can kind of help you along the way. She even had her own trail nickname, Inchworm, due to the slow pace she had while on hikes.
Okay.
I know. Because apparently, like, trail nicknames are a big thing.
Okay.
So you give yourself a trail nickname, and that's how people know who you are.
Plus, you weren't allowed to give yourself nicknames.
On the trail, anything. So her husband agreed to help her out as she made her way, meeting her at different points for little reunions and resupplies.
Aw.
So Jerry, I think is how you would pronounce it, Jerry and her friend Jane Lee set out to hike the trail together on April 23rd, 2013, where they would be starting in Harpers Ferry, West Virginia, and going all the way to the end in Maine. So not necessarily Georgia, but still pretty far.
Yeah.
Her husband, George, would meet them along the way with supplies. But on June 30th, Lee had to stop in New Hampshire and return home due to a personal family emergency. But Lee was afraid to leave Jerry alone. She said that Jerry sometimes had trouble keeping up and had very questionable skills with a compass, which she showed a few times by taking a wrong turn on more than one occasion. Lee also said that Jerry was afraid to be alone and scared of the dark. Her doctor later said that she was prone to panic attacks and had to take anxiety medicine due to that.
But that's why I wouldn't even go.
Right. But she kept making her way on her own, and by July 21st, she had reached the Poplar Ridge lean-in in western Maine. So a lean-in is just kind of like a little shelter. It protects you from like wind and rain and stuff. Only 200 miles from the end of the trail on Mount Katahdin. So her plan was to hike to the Spalding Lean-To, which was about 9 miles away from the Poplar Ridge Lean-To, make camp, then the next morning hike the 13 more miles to the Route 27 crossing where she and her husband had planned to meet up. So what is that, 22 miles in all over 2 days? So at 6:30 a.m. on July 22nd, another hiker named Dottie Rust had taken a picture of Jerry next to the lean-to before she set off on the trail. This would be the last time anyone saw her alive. But on July 22nd, 2013, which is apparently World Golf Day, yeah, Jerry disappeared after leaving the marked trail to relieve herself. And what is haunting about her story is that she left journal entries detailing her entire ordeal, as well as text messages to her family that never sent. Yes. So all of this helped investigators get a clear picture of what actually happened to her, but that came out later. So kind of what they were able to gather, documents show that she had tried to text her husband after she stepped off the trail. At 11 a.m., she had tried to send, quote, "In some trouble. Got off trail to go to BR. Now lost. Can you call AMC to see if a trail maintainer can come help me? Somewhere north of Woods Road. XOX." But the message would never actually go through due to the horrible service in the area. So somewhere I read that she had like a GPS device that works without cell phone service. Like you don't need cell phone service, but she left it in her hotel room.
That defeats the purpose.
Yes. So over the next hour and a half, wardens determined that she tried to find higher ground and tried to send that text message about 10 more times, each time with it failing. She eventually decided to set up camp where she was and was determined to continue on in the morning. At 4:18 p.m. the next day, she tried to send another text that said, quote, "Lost since yesterday. Off trail 3 or 4 miles. Call police for what to do, please. XOX." But again, message was never sent. George, her husband, started to get worried at this point as he still hadn't heard from his wife, so he contacted authorities and an official search began. The search went on for 7 days and expanded just past what the game wardens could do. Aircraft, state police, national park rangers, and fire departments joined in on the search. This ended up being the largest search effort ever conducted in Maine. Hundreds of trained and skilled rescuers and ordinary citizens searched and searched for weeks. AppalachianTrail.com said, quote, "We are thankful for the Civil Air Patrol, ground searchers, Mohosuc search and rescue teams, Franklin County SAR, Maine Warden Service, the Acadia National Park SAR, and Maine Search and Rescue Canine teams, along with many dedicated volunteers and others not mentioned for their heroic and dedicated efforts."
Wow.
So I wanted to list all the people.
Yeah.
They scoured the area, they brought in dogs, but all to no avail. Not prevail. No avail. Unfortunately, after 7 days on July 30th, the initial search had to be suspended. It was clear to everyone, especially the family, that wardens were doing all they could to find Gary, even after the initial search had to be suspended. They followed up on every single tip they received, even bogus tips from psychics, tips that suggested Bigfoot was responsible, and tips that just seemed odd. So some of the tips they received. One they got was just weird. So an inn owner who owned an inn replayed a message that he received to authorities. So the voicemail was from a hiker who said that she had been with Largay on Spalding Mountain. The voicemail was garbled, but a sentence or two could be heard more clearly. That sentence was, quote, "I spent the night at the Spalding lean-to with Inchworm, the missing hiker. Tell her husband she's going to be late." They weren't able to find the caller. They had no idea what they meant by she's going to be late. Like, was it a helpful tip? Just like, hey, heads up.
Right.
Did it have a more ominous tone to it? Like she's going to be late.
Yeah.
Never found the person who left the voicemail.
Huh.
Then 3 boys came forward and claimed that they had seen a quiet woman with glasses on the trail near the Spalding lean-to, but her family wasn't so sure about this tip. They knew Jerry was talkative and would have never been described as quiet. But this tip also led investigators to search the area as well.
Pays to stand out.
Right. So it led them to search more.
Yeah.
But still.
Nothing.
But not long after that, another hiker, whose trail name was Ivanich, came forward and confirmed that she and Gary had spent the night at the Poplar Ridge lean-to, one that's before the Spalding lean-to. She said that Gary left the next morning before she did. But Ivanich said that though she left later, she was a faster hiker and eventually passed Gary around noon, which would make sense with the inchworm.
Yeah.
For some reason, authorities came to believe that that had never happened and that Jerry had never actually made it to the Spalding lean-to. With this new revelation, it meant that the voicemail was wrong as Gary never made it to Spalding, and that the quiet lady the boys were talking about and had seen was probably Ivanich, not Gary.
Oh.
The official search was finally concluded on Sunday, August 4th. A little over 2 years later, in October of 2015, a forest worker for the U.S. Navy was walking around their property that borders the trail when he found a, quote, possible body. Lieutenant Kevin Adam would say that at the time he was thinking, quote, "The possibilities were it was a human body, it was animal bones, or if it was a human body, it was Gary Largay." When he walked a little further, he arrived at a site. He said, quote, "I saw a flattened tent with a green backpack outside of it and a human skull with what I believe to be a sleeping bag around it. I was 99% certain that this was Gary Largay's." He said that the campsite was pretty hidden and wasn't able to really be seen unless you were right on top of it. And at that point, it was under several large trees. Gary seemed to have made the campsite as hospitable as possible by tying a space blanket between branches to provide a cover. She had also made a bedding area out of small trees, pine needles, and possibly some dirt in an attempt to keep her tent out of any water. In her campsite, all the basic camping things were found: maps, rain jacket, space blanket, string, Ziploc bags, a flashlight that still worked, blue baseball cap, dental floss, and a homemade necklace. In her campsite was also where they found her journal, covered in moss, that was titled, "George, please read. XOXO." The journals that Jerry kept were able to provide a timeline for all of her thoughts and activities from July 22nd to August 10th, nearly a month after she went missing. The final entry in the journal was dated August 18th, though officials are unsure of the accuracy of that date, but that would mean that she survived on her own and on her own supplies for 26 days after she first stepped off the trail. So it's kind of concerning. They had at least 3 canine teams covering the area. All of them came within 100 yards of her camp, but never found her.
Could she have not been there at that time?
They said that because of how she was covered, how she was kind of in her sleeping bag and everything, her scent was probably just undetectable at that point.
Okay.
Her tent was only 2 miles off of the trail. So only a 30-minute walk to lodging. So she was going the wrong way trying to get out.
Yeah.
On May 25th, 2016, in response to formal Freedom of Information Act requests, over 1,500 pages of documents related to the search were released by the Maine Warden Service. Her journal detailed how she had been lost for 2 days, just wandering after a wrong turn across a stream. 2 weeks after she lost her way on August 6, 2013, she wrote, quote, "When you find my body, please call my husband George and my daughter Carrie. It will be the greatest kindness for them to know that I am dead and where you found me, no matter how many years from now. Please find it in your heart to mail the contents of this bag to one of them." She'd also cut up her credit cards and buried it, kept out her driver's license so she could be easily identified, and placed letters she had written to her family and the journals in a sealed bag. In one of her last letters, she wrote, "My deepest love to you and to all my friends. I pray to see you in heaven." So it's kind of sad that she knew, she wasn't making it. AppalachianTrail.com listed some of the common things people believe for what happened to her. So they believe she was done in by a mysterious hiker, someone who picked her up and drove her away down some impassable road, that her husband did something, anyone except her husband did something. She was captured by someone from a secret military installation. Maybe she just decided to run away and begin a new life somewhere and left the trail of her own free will and volition and has remained off the grid for 2 years. But the state of Maine's medical examiner's report gave us a few facts about her death. No foul play was suspected regarding her death. The cause of death was inanition, which is exhaustion caused by lack of nourishment. Evidence showed she died in her sleeping bag inside the tent. However, her remains were subsequently strewn around the immediate area by animals. Each bone found at the scene was examined and showed no signs of perimortem trauma at or near the time of death, which is trauma to the bones that's resulted from animals.
Mm-hmm.
So it was determined that she died of exposure.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of people are saying the inanition is that's kind of when you just simply kind of perish because you don't have enough food or nourishment.
Mm-hmm.
But people were saying then how did she have the ability to get into her sleeping bag and get into the tent and get all of these things ready if that's how she died?
Yeah.
Because I read there was one
she
website.
Made it 26 days.
Right. Because there was this one website that kind of went into all of the different stuff
Mm-hmm.
about this case, and there were comments on it, and that's what some of the people were saying in the comments.
Mm-hmm.
So I know it's been years, but if you have information to share about Gary Largay, please call the Maine Warden Service Public Safety Dispatch Center in Augusta at 207-624-7076. There's a toll-free number when calling within Maine, 800-452-4664. We will put that in our show notes. So a few creepy facts I wanted to leave you with. Since 1974, 11 people have lost their lives on the Appalachian Trail, some by just mere accidents, some by much more malicious things. And more than 60 people have died on Katahdin, the first known death recorded in 1933. In 2020, 2 hikers died on the mountain within a 2-day span. So if you decide to hike the Appalachian Trail or Katahdin, come prepared, tell others where you will be, when you will reach certain spots, always have a GPS device with you that works without cell signal, and most importantly, be careful and do not underestimate the wilderness. Whew. I know. It should have ended with the happy one, but I thought that was the only one I was going to cover, and then it was really short. Because he lived.
A boy who lived.
Come to die.
Those were really good. I was intrigued.
Yes, I was intrigued too. They're very sad.
They are sad.
I can just not even imagine the terrifyingness of being in the woods and being lost and not being able to find your way out.
Mm-hmm.
And then in her situation, knowing that you're not getting out.
Yeah.
And then with Jessie Hoover, what happened? Like, where is she?
Yeah.
Like, I get she was a little bit older. I mean, she was only 56. But some of the article said, like, she was a little overweight. She definitely wasn't prepared. So it could have just been, like, elements and something like that. But then it's like, where is she?
Yeah. That's always the one, like, big question mark. Like, I know the wilderness is vast and so many things can happen.
Mm-hmm.
But when you hear that, like, well, we had dogs, we had all these searches and we looked and we looked and we looked and we couldn't find them.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, did you really just miss
It could have
them?
been, because if you have such, like, thick vegetation, if they're under... Like, I covered one story, I can't remember what state it was, but the person was hidden under brush.
Mhm.
And so they searched everywhere. They just missed some of these sections of brush because you just can't see it.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like if I was in that situation and, like, looking for someone, I would feel overwhelmed of, like, making sure that I felt like I covered every inch of the area that I was searching.
Right. I don't think I could do it.
Mm-mm.
I'd feel like I didn't search enough if I
Yep.
didn't find them. And I would be,
Absolutely.
like, focused on the fact, like, they're in here. Like, I
Yeah.
know they're in my area and I just can't find them.
It's like a really fucked up version of hide and seek.
Yeah. Yeah. Where the person can't tell, like, you can't be like, ollie, ollie, oxen free, come on out.
Yeah, right. Marco.
But yeah, so those are 3 big stories that happened in Baxter State Park.
That's quays.
I know. All right, Mackenzie, what do you got?
All right. So I've been looking forward to this story for quite some time.
It has been on our spreadsheet for so long,
So long.
but we had to get through all the states first before we could circle back to one we had already done.
Exactly. So this case is solved, but many believe that justice was never served because the wrong man has been convicted of the crime.
Oh no.
So does the circumstantial evidence against him really prove that he's the killer? Well, our story really begins in Norway, in the little town of Lervig,
Oh.
in the late 1800s, where John and Marian Hontvedt are to be married. John set sail to America and after about 7 years became a successful schooner and a fisherman.
Oh.
He was finally able to pay passageway for his brother Matthew and his wife Marian. Marin. It's probably Marin, not Marian. Okay, I'll try to remember Marin, not Marian.
It's not my story.
No, I know. John and Marin settled in a small cottage on Smuttynose Island that they had rented from the Baxter family, who owned the Appledore Hotel on Appledore Island.
Thaxter family or Baxter? Thaxter.
Thax.
Like Thackeray. Thackeray Binks.
Yep.
Okay, because I was going to say, if it's
Thaxter.
Baxter, wow.
No, it's Baxter. The Isle of Shoals is a small group of islands and tidal ledges that are located 6 miles, or 10 kilometers, off the coast of New Hampshire and 7 miles, or 11 kilometers, off the coast of Maine.
So proud of you.
Thank you. God, do it for our girl, Debbie.
Our listeners outside of the U.S., thank you.
Yeah. The one I know of for sure. Smuttynose, along with some other islands, are part of the town Kittery in York County, Maine, which is why I couldn't do this story when I originally wanted to do it, because I saw that it was technically in Maine and I had been told about this story for New Hampshire.
Yeah, she wanted to do this for New Hampshire, which was back in the summer.
Yeah.
And we are not in the summer anymore. So
No.
many, many months ago.
And I said, technically, it's in Maine.
I was like, technically, you can make it whatever state you want to
Right.
if you explain it well enough.
And so then I just decided to wait. So I've been waiting a really long time. So the island got its name from a fisherman who thought the huge masses of seaweed at one of the island made it look like a smutty nose of a giant sea creature.
That's cute.
Apparently, though, like smutty and that word by itself is not a good word.
Oh,
It could be describing various things depending on which website you go to.
of course.
One was like smut porn or whatever, or like smut
Oh.
movies where it's like,
Oh.
yeah, you've probably heard it before.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I didn't put the 2 and 2 together because you're talking about an island. So my brain didn't go to that.
Absolutely. Neither did mine, but I was looking at what it meant. And then I saw all those and I was like, well, this one is called that because it looks like it's snot.
Ah.
That's what I'm assuming with the seaweed at one end of a giant
Oh.
creature, like its nose was running.
Oh.
So it had a smutty nose. So John did make a comfortable living from fishing, and Maren kept a bright and tidy home with pictures of family and shelves full of plants.
Oh,
Maren did begin to grow a bit lonely. John would be far away on the sea, setting his trawls or sailing to nearby Portsmouth to sell his fish.
I can see why that would be really lonely.
Yeah.
When Joe works late, I get lonely.
There you go. So you understand.
I truly understand.
So Maren was delighted when she received the news that her sister Karen would be moving to the Isle of Shoals and staying with the Hortvets for a bit until she got settled. Karen arrived in 1871 and stayed with her sister for a few months before moving to Appledore to work as a housekeeper at the hotel. Karen had lost her husband many years ago back in Norway and still mourned his loss. She didn't speak a lick of English at first, but after some time working in the hotel, she learned the language and she was a very hard worker.
Good for her. English is not easy.
No. About a year after Karen's arrival, their brother Ivan and his wife, Anith, moved over from Norway to live with Maren and John.
Anith?
Well, and
no, it's fine. It's just the way that you said it because it sounded like there was going to be more coming after.
I know.
And then you go, Anith.
I know. When I write some of these things, it's in my head and I'm typing it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I say it how
you said it in your head.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
But I know that that's not the right way.
Yep.
And especially with the way that her name is spelled, I kept wanting to call her Athena.
But you know, Athena and Anith aren't spelled the same way, right? Athena would be A-T-H-E.
Oh, right. See?
Because when you said that, I was like, yeah, okay.
That's why. Now you understand. Anyway, they were newlyweds.
There we go.
And Ivan was going to work with John and his brother in John's fishing business. Marianne was over the moon with delight with having all her family so close. She told her friend Celia Thaxton, quote, "I never was so happy in my life as when we were all living there together."
Aw.
There was one more who had been staying with the Hontvets, Louis Wagner. He was a drifter who had come to the States around the same time as John from northern Prussia.
Wow.
Little is known about Wagner except that it is rumored that his life had been a difficult one. Marion described him as tall, powerful, dark, with a peculiarly... That's a hard word.
Peculiar.
Yeah, you were about to make fun of me words.
Well, because I can say peculiar.
Yeah,
Peculiarly.
Peculiarly.
My friend at work today, he was telling me about like the Dateline episode and something corroborated something. And he goes, cooperated. And I said, please say the word again. I said, say what you said again. He goes, oh, did I like explain it really badly? He said, no, oh my God. And then I felt so bad because I was like, no, I just want you to say the word corroborated. He goes, corroborated? And I said, that's how my friend says it with the W.
It's hard.
It's really hard.
It's really hard.
And then it made me think, am I saying it wrong? Corroborated. Cooperated. But there's no W.
Cooperated.
We'll look it up after this episode.
There's definitely no W.
There's not. It's just R's. Correct. R's, O's, and B's.
Uh-huh. Too many. He was just a quiet dude.
Okay.
Wagner had been hired by John and had been allowed to live on the other side of the duplex that they were renting. Wagner wasn't the best worker. He often complained that rheumatism, which is any disease marked by inflammation and pain in the joints, muscles, or fibrous tissue, especially rheumatoid arthritis, and it prevented him from working. He's 28.
Oh, I mean, it's possible.
Sure.
It is. It's possible. I'm not saying that's probably what it is, but it's possible.
Marion recalls that she never saw Louis drunk. He was always keeping his wits about him. He would linger on the outskirts of a drunken brawl, listening and observing it all, but never getting involved.
Ooh, that's like me.
He was always lurking, lingering, looking, and listening.
Not that, though.
He would never look a man straight in the eyes. When Marion's brother Ivan and his wife arrived from Norway, they told Wagner that he could no longer stay with them. Wagner had to move off the island and shared a small room with two other men in a cheap boarding house on the Portsmouth waterfront. He was 6 weeks late on rent, and another fisherman said that Wagner had to borrow 35 cents just to buy tobacco. He tried his luck with fishing, but never really made much money from it. On March 5th, 1873, John Hontevet. That sounds
really good.
Norwegian. Hontevet.
Yeah, good.
His brother Matthew and brother-in-law Ivan set sail on John's schooner, the Clarabella, to draw in their trawls. Apparently, John would fish in a very progressive way. Like he was one of the first to kind of pioneer the idea with like the big, casting a big net kind of thing.
Oh, wow.
I think, I never looked up what a trawl is. It's not just like, a fishing rod and
right.
That's it. So.
I feel like that wouldn't be very helpful.
Well, that's how they used to do it. And then, mass fishing. When they arrived at the docks in the city's gritty South End neighborhood, Wagner was lingering by the docks. The men exchanged greetings, and they noticed a slight tinge of annoyance from Wagner towards Ivan. Wagner asked what brought them to the docks, and John explained that they were expecting their bait to come in by train. Supposedly, John had foolishly revealed that he had saved $600 to buy a new boat. John asked Wagner if he would help with the bait in exchange for pay, to which Wagner agreed. He needed the cash, they needed the help.
Mm-hmm.
According to John's later trial testimony, Wagner asked 3 times if the men planned to return to Smuttynose that night. John shared that if the train arrived on time, that they would be able to get back to the island that night. But if it was late, then they would have to wait until morning before making the trip back. Wagner said that he was concerned about whether Marion and Anith would be safe all night, all alone on that island. That they were the only ones who lived there. But the delivery, John learned, would not arrive until midnight. Wagner said that he would be back later to help with the bait trawls. John's crew worked through the night, but Wagner never returned. Little did the men know, across the way on their little island, a heinous crime was taking place.
Oh, no.
Karen was sleeping on a makeshift bed near the stove in the kitchen. She was startled awake by the entrance of a lone, dark figure. In an effort to remain unidentifiable, the figure grabbed a heavy wooden chair and brought it down hard on top of Karen. The disturbance woke Marion and Anith, who were sleeping in the downstairs bedroom. So Karen was originally, when she was working at the hotel, she decided, well, depending on who you read, either she got in a disagreement with the owner, not Celia, but her mother, and was fired.
Okay.
Celia says that she left to go do something in Boston.
Okay.
But that in between time is she was staying with her sister. So she wasn't technically supposed to be there.
Ugh.
Yeah.
I mean, all of it's bad, but those are always the worst.
Right.
When, like, the person wasn't supposed to be there, or
if the train had arrived on time.
Right. Or they switch shifts, like, and something bad happens. Like, things like that.
Yep. So the disturbance woke Marion and Anith, who were sleeping in the downstairs range. The family dog, Range, I don't know.
However you want to say it.
Well, I don't like any way to say it because I'm like, that's not a very cute dog name, but I'm assuming it's something in Norwegian.
It's not like Sprinkles.
No. The family dog began frantically barking. Karen, dazed and confused, ran to join her sister and sister-in-law in the bedroom. The dark figure trapped the 3 women in there.
Ooh.
They huddled together, terrified for their lives. Anith tried to escape out the window, but was blocked by the figure. Now, this part is a little confusing because of the way it's described. It sounds like the person blocked her from getting out, but I think she got out, but she didn't get much past that. Like, she might have gotten out the window, and then he stopped her because they were all on the first floor.
Right.
So, because they talk about the guy coming back into the house.
Oh.
And so the way...
So why didn't the other 2 try to leave then? Oh, he locked them in the room, right?
Well, see, that's the part that's kind of confusing is like reading 1, the way that it's described was that she goes to try to get out through the bedroom window. He stops her, attacks her. Then he's coming back to deal with the 2 other women, and they talk about him coming back inside.
Okay.
But it's not clear. But regardless, tries to escape, didn't work out. As she looked up, the other women could hear her scream, "Lewis, Lewis, Lewis," before falling silent as the shadowy figure struck her with an axe.
Oh my God.
Though Marion couldn't see his face, she knew it could only be Lewis Wagner.
Right.
Injured and frozen in fear, Karen could not move. The dark figure was coming back for the other women. Marion climbed out the window and ran. She was hiding among the icy rocks when she heard the final screams of her sister Karen.
Oh my God.
There were many empty buildings on the island at the time that Marion could have been hiding in. The attacker searched for Marion, left behind his size 11 boot prints in the snow. The robber-turned-killer washed up by the island well, searched the house for John Hontvet's rumored hidden fortune, leaving behind bloody handprints. Granted, this is before fingerprints.
It's the whole, there's blood, mop it up.
Right. The assailant dragged Athene's body into the kitchen, ate a meal, and rode back to the main island. So Celia writes this like poem, short story thing about this whole incident. And
Wait, who writes it?
Celia Baxter. She was friends with Marion.
Okay.
They lived in one of their properties. So this describes what it was like on the icy rocks. Where can she go? Her little dog, frightened into silence, follows her, pressing so close to her feet that she falls over him more than once. Looking back, she sees Lewis has a lit lamp and is seeking for her. She flies to the cove, if she can, but find his boat and row away in it and get help. It is not there. There is no boat in which she can get away. She hears Karen's wild screams. He is killing her. Oh, where can she go? Is there any place on the little island where he will not find her? She thinks she will creep into one of the empty old houses by the water, but no, she reflects, if I hide there, Ringe, the dog, will bark and betray me the moment Lewis comes to look for me. And the dog saved her life that day. For the next day, Lewis's bloody tracks were found all about those old buildings where he had sought her. So if she had stayed, she was right. She would have been found.
Mm-hmm.
She flies with Karen's awful cries in her ears away over the rocks and snow to the furthest limit she can gain. The moon has set. It is about 2:00 in the morning and oh so cold. She shivers and shudders from head to feet, but her agony of terror is so great she is hardly conscious of the bodily sensation. And the welcome is the freezing snow, the jagged ice and iron rocks that tear her unprotected feet, the bitter brine that beats against the shore, the winter winds that make her shriek and tremble. They're not so unkind as man's ingratitude. Falling often, rising, struggling on with feverish haste, she makes her way to the very edge of the water. Down almost into the sea she creeps between two rocks, upon her hands and knees and crouches, face downward, with the dog nestled close beneath her breast, not daring to move through the long hours that must pass before the sun will rise again.
Aww.
She is so near the ocean she can almost reach the water with her hand. Had the wind breathed the least roughly, the waves must have washed over her. And then we go back to the other people. Okay. So I thought it was really cute that the dog stayed with her.
Yeah.
If that part is true.
That is really cute.
Yeah. So we're going to pretend that it is.
Does the dog survive?
Dog is fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then aw.
No dogs were harmed in the making of this story.
Good.
So at daybreak, Marion, terrified, shuddering cold, slowly makes her way out of the rocks. She doesn't know where Wagner is and if he's still even on the island, but she knows she needs help.
Mm-hmm.
She knew there was no way that she'd be able to cross the ocean waterways to the next inhabited island, no matter how short the distance. She saw the workmen building the new hotel on Star Island and tried to signal their attention. She waved her skirt and screamed as loudly as her battered body would allow. Chivalry was apparently starting its descent at this time because, according to one source, the men looked at the woman in distress and then promptly went back to work. Yeah. Marion knew that she needed to get to the other side of the island that faces Appledore. Her neighbor and fellow Norwegian, I wrote his whole name. I was like, oh, Jorgen von Strangle. It's like,
What was that from?
Fairly Odd
Odd
Parents.
Jorgen.
No, there's no N.
Jorgo.
We're just going to say George. George Edvard Ingenbertsen.
Nailed it.
And his wife and children lived in a little cottage that was directly opposite of her. She was afraid to pass her house. She didn't want a chance seeing any remnants of last night's horror.
Yeah.
She musters up the last bit of bravery she has left and makes her way to the northern bridge. George's children were outside playing when they heard the faint cry and screams of a woman. They see Marion and immediately run to get their father. George makes his way across the narrow waterway and is stunned to see Marion Horvath in her nightdress with her torn bare feet, cut and scraped from the icy rocks, a nasty bruise on her face, and half senseless with cold and terror.
Aww.
He cries, Marion, Marion, who has done this? What is it? Who is it? The only thing Marion can manage to reply is, Lewis, Lewis, Lewis.
Aww.
John, Matthew, and Ivan are blissfully unaware of the horror that awaits them as they begin to make their way back to the island. The men are confused as they are signaled to land in Appledore instead of Smuttynose. They begin to hear whispers of something terrible. Ivan runs into George's home to see his badly beaten sister surrounded by the women and children of the community. His eyes frantically dart around the room for the familiar sight of his beloved Aneth. He asks where she is, and all Marion can say is, Aneth is at home. Ivan and John made a dash for Smuttynose and immediately saw the blood in the snow. They burst through the door to see Aneth butchered on the kitchen floor.
Oh.
Ivan is overcome with grief as he clutches his dead wife. John checked the rest of the house to find Karen beaten and strangled in the downstairs bedroom. John goes to check on his wife Marion in Appledore before bringing a description of Louis Wagner and the details of the crime to the police. Meanwhile, Wagner rode like a madman and landed on the shores of Newcastle as the sun began to rise that morning. To his dismay, he is seen and recognized by many as he made his way, windburned, coated in ice, spots of blood, trudging the roughly 3 miles back to the Johnson boarding house in Portsmouth.
Who was this, Lewis?
Mm-hmm. Witnesses would later identify him at the, quote, trial of the century.
Oh.
19th century. Because this is the 1800s. Yeah.
That part's always so confusing.
It is very confusing.
Just make it whatever the first 2 letters are.
Right.
Or numbers,
Yeah.
not letters.
Yeah, that too.
Like we should be in the 20th century because 20.
Right.
But no, we should be in the 21st.
Wagner swore that the blood was fish guts to anyone who gave him an odd look. He grabbed what little he had and hopped to the morning train to Boston. Once there, he got a haircut and shaved off his beard. He bought a set of used clothes and boots, chatted incoherently with a local sex worker, and in total he spent about $15 to $16 that day, which was the same amount that had been missing from the Hanvent's house.
How convenient.
Before the day's end, Wagner was broke again. He made his way to a boarding house he once lived in and begged the owner, Catherine Brown, for a free meal. Once he was asleep, Mrs. Brown called the police and Wagner was arrested.
Why'd she call the police?
I don't know.
Interesting.
When news of Hanvet's story comes through the telegram to Boston police, they kindly hand him over to Portsmouth officers. Wagner asserted his innocence, even on the gallows. The prisoner arrived in Portsmouth on March 7th to an angry mob assembled at the train station. The crowd chanted, "Lynch him! Kill him! String him up!" Police officers, with the assistance of Marines from Portsmouth Naval Shipyard, safely escorted Wagner through the streets to the police station. Within an hour, the crew of the Clarabella entered the police station. "Oh, damn you, murderer!" John Hanvet cursed Wagner. "You killed my wife's sister and her brother's wife." "Johnny, you are mistaken," Wagner replies, gripping the jailhouse bars with his heavily blistered hands. "I hope you will find the right man who done it." "I got him," John said. "Hanging is too good for you. Hell is too good for you. You ought to be cut up into pieces and put on fishhooks." This dialogue, we should be aware, comes from Wagner's testimony at trial. In his defense, the prisoner would blame John Hanvet, I feel like I say it different every time.
Just slightly. We know who you're talking about.
Yeah. For leaving the women alone and unprotected.
Oh, please.
Later, while on death row, he would be repeatedly claimed that Marion was the actual killer.
Okay.
The following day, Louis Wagner found himself in the public eye. Many people, including women and children, gathered around the jail to catch a glimpse of him. Some were surprised to see that he appeared to be polite and like a good-looking young man who seemed to really enjoy the attention, especially from the ladies.
Of course.
2 local newspapers immediately took 2 opposing sides regarding whether Wagner was guilty or innocent. During questioning, Wagner gave a detailed account of his whereabouts. He claimed to have gotten drunk at a bar, but couldn't remember the name of the location of the place.
Naturally.
As someone who rarely drinks.
Oh, yeah.
He said the alcohol made him sick, causing him to slip and fall. After that, he spent most of the night outdoors in the streets of Portsmouth, though he couldn't pinpoint where exactly.
And it's not necessarily making you sick if you slip and fall. That's kind of what it does.
And if you hardly drink, I guess that's why it makes you sick.
Yeah.
He later claimed to have returned to bait trawls with John, but fell asleep in an adjacent room without anyone noticing. Wagner denied any involvement in disposing of a bloody shirt in the toilet after returning to his boarding house.
So they found a bloody shirt in the toilet?
An examination of the stolen boat showed that the wooden pins and the oar locks had been significantly worn down in a single night. He also stole the boat to get back and forth. Locals were ignited with anger 60 hours following the murder as the lifeless bodies of the 2 women were brought back from the Isle of Shoals. According to the coroner's grim report, the 25-year-old Aneth Christensen's head had suffered a brutal and savage assault, leaving it in horrific state.
Jeez.
Said it all in one breath. Meanwhile, in the same home that had once been shared by Wagner, the body of 39-year-old Karen Christensen was found concealed beneath the bed, having been subjected to a brutal beating and strangulation. The accused maintained his innocence, frequently breaking into tears that startled the spectators. Even Celia Thaxter later conceded that Wagner's behavior while incarcerated and during the trial was an astonishing display of acting that genuinely sowed doubt about his guilt among the people.
Wow.
He insisted that he couldn't fathom why he would have harmed the Hanvets, considering them to be his closest friends. 12 male jurors deliberated for a mere 55 minutes before rendering a guilty verdict.
Dang.
A week later, back in the courtroom, Wagner was sentenced to death by hanging. He returned to his cell in chains, displaying an eerie calm. That very night, he managed to pick the lock on his cell door and vanished, taking 2 associates with him. The escape of Wagner from the Alfred facility stirred great commotion and no small amount of anger, as reported by the Portsmouth Evening Times. 3 days later, the convicted axe murderer was apprehended near Gonick, New Hampshire. The prisoner, however, offered a peculiar explanation. See, I can say that word. He claimed that he wasn't fleeing, but merely seeking some exercise.
I was going to come right back.
Right. Gosh, guys. And another surprising twist, Wagner underwent a conversion to Christianity, fervently professing that God would never allow the execution of an innocent man. A couple years later, Louis Wagner found himself on the gallows in Thomaston, Maine, sharing the grim stage with another individual marked by a gruesome act. John True Gordon, 3 names,
Yeah, never a good person.
Had brutally murdered his brother, sister-in-law, and their 17-month-old daughter with an axe as they lay asleep in their family bed.
So, like, somewhat similar.
Yeah. He went on to douse the lifeless bodies with kerosene and set their farmhouse ablaze.
Oh.
Gordon had confessed to his heinous crimes and even attempted suicide, while Wagner stubbornly clung to his assertion of innocence.
Of innocence.
As the local sheriff lowered a black hood over Wagner's head, the Smuttynose murderer cast one final sympathetic look towards his fellow condemned man. Good and poor John were gone, he somberly uttered. There are many theories to the contrary that Louis Wagner is responsible for the Smuttynose murders. Some believe that Marion is really to blame for the brutal slaying of her sister and her sister-in-law.
Right.
This theory comes from a bestseller, Weight of the Water, by Anita Shreve. While her book was meant to be a work of fiction, many believed it told truthful facts of the trial transcripts.
Oh.
But she wasn't the first to spout the Marion did it tale. On September 23rd, 1873, Louis Wagner, who was on death row, tried a last-ditch effort to avoid his fate, and he accused Mrs. Huntvet, of murdering two girls, though two women.
Right.
In a desperate move, he also claimed that John had paid $500 to hire witnesses and shift blame away from his wife. It was a story of desperate measures and accusations.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Many doubted that Wagner would have been capable of rowing back and forth between all the islands. John, however...
Why? Are the islands, like, really far apart?
So John, for the record, testified that he had made the trip in a rowboat at least 50 times. Kayakers regularly row the distance today. And in a 21st century reenactment, a 75-year-old businessman in a replica wooden boat covered the distance easily in 2 hours and 14 minutes.
Oh, so yeah.
He'd be fine.
Right.
While there are many who have their own ideas of who the real culprit is, J. Dennis Robinson, who wrote an article that was published in the Portsmouth Herald for their weekly History Matters section, has a pretty good argument for why Louis Wagner is rightly accused and convicted.
Okay.
He says, even conspiracy theorists admit that Wagner's behavior is odd. The night before the murder, he was penniless and unkempt. The day following the murder, Wagner shaved his beard, hopped on a train to Boston, and was apprehended wearing brand new clothes. His purchases, according to one account, roughly equal the $15 found missing from the Huntvet home.
Again, convenient, yes.
When arrested, Wagner went along without protest, never questioning his captors. A button reportedly belonging to Marion was found in his pocket.
Oh.
His boots matched bloody prints found on the island. A shirt covered in human blood, although he insisted it was the fish guts,
Right.
was later discovered tucked inside the privy at his Portsmouth boarding house.
Sucks that you can't, like, test the blood and be like,
Right.
it is fish blood, or oh, it is human blood.
Right? They didn't even know what DNA was that time.
God. Can you imagine?
No.
Like, he ate there. He touched, well, whoever it was who did it, ate
Well, yeah,
there.
his bloody handprints were all over the place.
Right.
Yeah. Definitely would have been slam dunk in today's age.
Oh, in today, that would have been solved in like a day.
Yeah.
They would have had the guilty party like a day.
Right. They would have probably shown him all the evidence and he would have copped a plea.
Right,
Like-
right. We got a plea deal for you, dude. Like, come on, just
Right,
take it.
Right. Catching a train out of town, Wagner reportedly told a passerby that he was in a hurry because he had just killed 2 sailors and had to kill 1 more.
Yes, because that's a common thing you say to just people you pass by.
What tightens the noose for me, meaning the guy who wrote this, not me.
I was going to say, that was clever, Mackenzie.
Oh, yeah, no.
Just like the Booth brothers will never give the town the time of day again.
Yeah. Me as in the reporter me, not
Right.
me as in, yeah.
Yeah.
Wagner's total inability to account for his whereabouts on the night of the murder. 3 times Wagner asked John Huntvent if the women would be alone on the island. He did not show up to the dock to bait trawls. Wagner said because he went to a saloon and got drunk. No one saw him there. No one saw him lying in a public street where he said he was passed out.
And you don't drink a lot, so why now?
He didn't show up at his boarding house on Water Street, and as soon as she was discovered wandering barefoot in her nightclothes, Marion Huntvent identified Louis Wagner as the killer. It was a risky statement. Even if a single witness had seen Wagner in Portsmouth at one of the many locations he swore he visited, his innocence was assured. Instead, Wagner was spotted in a rowboat near Newcastle the next morning and later walking from Newcastle back to Portsmouth. There he shaved, disposed of his bloody shirt, and bought new clothes for a sudden and inexplainable trip out of town. Every homicide does not require a tricky ending, and sometimes, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, justice is served.
Ooh.
That is the murders on Smuttynose Island.
So do you think he did it?
100%.
So then why do some people not?
Because other things were written that were not meant to necessarily, like, one of the articles I was reading was talking about the things that came out like after his death, like this poem by Celia Baxter came out 2 years after he died.
Okay.
Some of the people in town were like not a fan just because of how graphic and given the time frame, like not proper for a woman to be writing about kind of thing.
Ugh.
Yeah. And then another guy wrote about it in like the 1920s who, according to this article, is like, apparently this guy was like one of the pioneers or founders or fathers or whatever of like true crime writing.
Oh.
And but his story, again, it confirms that Wagner's the one that did it.
Mm-hmm.
And people were still like, no, like this can't be true. And it's got to be Marion. Like, and so
why would Marion do it?
I don't know.
Like, what is their logic?
Well, and that was the other thing that this guy said was like, Lewis had the means, the motive, and the opportunity.
Right. Absolutely.
So while, yes, it's technically circumstantial, like it's a pretty good one.
Right. Too bad today.
Right.
It would be like a slam dunk. Like, there's a bloody fingerprint.
Right.
There's blood.
Right. Exactly. So, especially the blood on the shirt.
Right.
Like, so I definitely think he did it. I think people want there to be this like conspiracy,
twist, weird, wild thing.
Yeah, on this island, and like even like local folklore will like spin a tale of maybe it was Marion, and you know,
Ooh.
Yeah, exactly. But logically speaking,
right,
Lewis makes the most sense.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't even have anyone I can like anything I can counter with that. It sounds really like he did it,
and like multiple people saw Marion like afterwards,
right?
So they can attest to her.
Was she covered in any blood?
Her feet were.
Well, that's from
that was
in the
it.
Snow.
That was like when someone was saying that, I remember one rebuttal against it was like she had blood on her because her feet were so cut up.
Right.
But that was it. It's not like it was splattered all over her body.
Like someone else was.
Right. On his shirt. Hers were on her feet.
Well, yeah, I'd say this is a pretty open and shut case.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I'm glad you were finally able to cover it.
Me too. I was like excited that there was some conspiracies, but I'm like, the story itself is so long that we'll just like touch on like, not everybody believes it, but it's probably true.
Well, I found it very interesting.
Thank you.
I liked this one.
I started it from beginning, middle, and end.
Oh, amazing. How the story should go.
I know. I didn't do any like flashbacks or like.
Oh, like that one time, Kenzie really got all of this music ready and we practiced it and the music worked through the recording. And then when we actually recorded, the music didn't work. So she had all these like rewind sounds and fast forward sounds to help you keep track of the story that she was telling. And nope, didn't work.
Well, now I bought us a whiteboard.
And what will that do?
Well, it'll help us at least write it down to keep track. Nobody else can see it, but that's okay.
That's okay. You'll have a sign, fast forward, rewind.
Rewind.
Thanks for listening, as always.
Yes, as always. And happy Kenzie month.
Yes, happy Kenzie month.
I'm about to, if y'all thought I was obnoxious before, it's about to ramp it up.
I'm sorry. If you have rated and reviewed us anywhere, please send us an email letting us know you did, because sometimes the usernames are just random usernames.
Correct.
If you have given us a negative review because you think we like talk like this, then like don't email us because like you're not going to get a sticker.
And like if you're bothered by the fact that we're scared of like spiders,
then screw you. But yeah, if you've rated us anywhere nicely, send us an email at ascarystatepodcast@gmail.com to let us know and we'll send you a little something.
Yeah, if you're a jackass, we'll put your shit on blast. So
boom.
Fuck around and find out, buddy. When she showed me that comment, I was like, he clearly hasn't listened to any other episode because there's so many things we've listed that we're also afraid of.
So many things.
Got a whole critic corner over here.
Well, thanks for listening. So stay scary.
Stay safe.